Hello, my name is Timothy Reed from the School of Computer Engineering at UNED in Spain. I want to talk about supporting vulnerable social groups, such as refugees and migrants, in online learning environments. I wanted to start off by looking at the concept of scaffolding, the idea of providing student support that diminishes over time as they become better at the learning process. Now, rather than giving you a theoretical presentation on this issue, I want to provide examples from two MOOCs which we've run from Erasmus Plus projects, Moonlight and Nexus, which illustrate these concepts nicely, and I think will make it easier to understand what's going on. You shouldn't worry that we're talking about MOOCs, massive open online courses, because the principles that I'm presenting will work just as well in any kind of online course, in any platform or learning management system. Okay, introduction. MOOCs as such are nothing new. So when anyone tells you that a particular kind of course or platform or environment is something particularly new, you should take it with a pinch of salt, because online teaching and learning has been going on for many decades, and the particular platforms that we use for this process change slightly, but not a great deal. The idea of MOOCs, massive open online courses, was termed back in 2012. Although in distance education, as I said, we've been doing these sorts of courses for a very long time. And then once again in 2020, the second year of the MOOC, they gained more focused and were used a lot online with students. And I want to specifically focus on the idea of active and passive scaffolding and how this can be used for inclusion. Now, the first example comes from a project called Moonlight, which was a massive open online courses for enhancing linguistic competencies and transverse skills for social inclusion and employability. You got the web address there. You can access the resources that are actually there online. Now, when we actually came to putting this MOOC together, we had an adaptability and scaffolding rubric, which I can present to you here very briefly in 5 key concepts, which I think are worth bearing in mind for any kind of online course if you want it to be as inclusive as possible. Firstly, and obviously the pedagogy, what kind of methodology we're going to use to teach and help the students learn, and how we're going to translate that in terms of online elements in a course. Secondly, linguistics. I mean, inclusive language is very important, but linguistics goes a lot further than just that. And in our case, it's a research group I'm a member of, focuses on applying languages to different technological environments. It made sense to have it in there. Thirdly, the social cultural aspects of any teaching environment. We can't necessarily assume that all the people that are going to be in the course are coming from the same social background as us. So we can't give it, if you like, a European feel necessarily. We need to be able to understand there'll be people from other kinds of social cultural backgrounds, and think about how we can make them feel included in the courses, so that quite possibly the people that are appearing in the audios and videos aren't all Europeans, for example, and also give them the opportunity to be able to express elements of their own culture and language in the course, which doesn't mean that all the forms have to be multilingual, just that we need to provide them some way of actually including this. Fourthly, technology, because not all students have access to powerful computers and fast internet connections. So it's necessary to anticipate the sorts of devices they'll be using, possibly tablets and even older mobile phones, and that they may not necessarily have access to the internet all the time. Therefore, it's important for them to be able to download the materials and the activities as far as possible and do them offline. Finally, institutionalization. If we're free to decide whichever tools we want to use for particular courses, then it's great. There's a lot of choice out there on the internet which we can use. However, if our institution is making us use a particular platform, then we need to obviously refine and adapt the particular courses that we're building to run effectively on that platform. Now, it's very important to include students in the course design from as early a stage as possible, and that's something you'll see in both of the The examples I'm actually showing you, either do it by reaching out. In our cases, we were working with refugee support groups, so we were able to use these groups to help us contact the students, and they came into the university, and we had a design thinking workshop to structure the course we were building. But if that's not possible, then we can use online questionnaires or other ways of reaching them. But it's important that they actually feel part of the design process. Now, the course we made, I don't particularly want to go into a lot of detail about this, was an LMOOC, a language MOOC for Spanish. So it's intended for refugees and migrants recently arrived at Spain, might only have an A1, A2 level, according to the Common European Frameworks of Reference. Each course lasts 6 weeks, and we had teaching teams which mixed facilitators, mentors, tutors, and teachers. And I'll come back to the difference between these figures later on. And it was important that these courses were refugee friendly in the sense that they felt supported and not excluded at any point in the course. Here's the structure. It's not particularly relevant for this course, but these were typical interactive scenarios that the students felt that they would like to have covered that would help them in their day-to-day life. Now, one of the key tools we have in any online learning experience are the forums. And as I said before, it depends very much on which particular tool you're using as the forums in your course. There are some very powerful, very flexible forums that introduce the idea of, if you like, karma in the forum. So somebody who answers questions and the answers are valued by other members in the community will gain karma points. And if you like, their prestige in the forum will increase, and opens the door to the way that they can interact with people. But in our case, the courses are run on the Open edX MOOC platform, which is very basic, and the forum tool didn't present a lot of communicative flexibility. Scaffolding then, passive and active scaffolding. What's the difference? Passive scaffolding is support that's provided to the students before the course is actually built. Active scaffolding are additional mechanisms that appear as the course goes on, regardless of who your student body is and where they come from, their experience. Each particular group will be different to the group before them and the group that comes after them. And it's difficult to actually anticipate the way that the kind of support they're going to need. So we need to have these two kinds of scaffolding. Now, this is part of the rubric that we actually use when we defined and built the scaffolding on our courses. Firstly, usability. I don't mean usability or accessibility in a traditional sense of the word, just in how easy it was to actually navigate these courses for people without any much experience, and the way in which the courses roll out well on mobile devices, and that the available materials could be downloaded and accessed in as flexible a way as possible. Connectivity, referring to the way that some of the materials could actually be used offline. We had students who had limited access, so they would download some content, listen to the audios, watch the videos, do the activities, and upload the results at the end. Then you have the two aspects of methodology. Macros, the implicit methodology, due to the kind of course you have. So MOOCs automatically have an associated set of learning potential because of their nature, that they are big, they are open, and they're online, etc. When the micro methodology, we're talking at the level of how learning is actually contemplated within the particular course. What kind of groups we're going to have, how we're going to get the students to work together, kinds of resources, etc. It's important that the courses should have as much of a practical application as possible. It's not theoretical. And then we come to the interaction when we talk about the facilitating and tutoring aspects of the course and the sorts of people that are taking part, and then finally the intercultural and ethical aspects. Linguistic scaffolding, as I said before, this refers to the simplicity of the expression and the predominance, the basic level of the language. If we're working with non-native speakers, perhaps even people who don't have experience of our same alphabet, then it's very important that the way that language is used, not only in interaction, but in the recording and preparation of the materials is actually tailored to these groups of people. Otherwise, they will have great difficulty learning. Scaffolding via the facilitation. As I mentioned before, we have facilitators. These are people who actually don't necessarily have a lot of knowledge about the content in the course, but their role is to come along and actually promote interaction and get the courses going. Because what you typically find is there's a lot of interaction, a lot of activity on a course at the very beginning, the first week, a lot at the end, but not a lot happening during the middle. And their role is to come in and to stir the course up and get the activity going. Secondly, you've got mentors. These are people also typically from the students' community, but they actually they have knowledge about the specific subjects being undertaken, therefore can engage with the students in a slightly more powerful way. Then we have some specific examples of what I'm calling ELSs and EPSs, which are e-learning students, and educational proxies, and I'll come back and talk to them, talk about this in a little while. And finally, the cultural, intercultural and ethical scaffolding. And as I mentioned before, we have to be careful that not all the students who will be taking part in the course will be from the same social context. So we need to make our teaching materials as inclusive as possible and to promote the actual intercultural awareness of users, which is actually very interesting because we can use that to promote interaction, which as such can actually facilitate the learning of the students. Okay, how can we actually scaffold the student interaction? Students learn by communicating, and it's important to actually scaffold that process as much as possible. And as I mentioned before, we have these figures which are called e-leading students, and educational proxies, which are concepts that have come from our experience and research, which I'll mention briefly afterwards. We also, particularly since we come from an applied linguistics background, used appraisal theory for inclusive language and tried to structure the kinds of activities in a way that would actually build upon these particular tools. E-leading students then. What are e-leading students? What you actually find in any online course, the same as a face-to-face course, but specifically in an online course, is that once the courses actually get going, there'll be particular students who are more active. They've got higher motivation, they're participating more in the course, and it's very important for the teaching team to identify these few students. And that's why we call them the e-leading students. And we can actually reach out to these students and particularly tell them that we're particularly happy and with their motivation, how they're actually working within the course, give them the term of e-leading students. We can give them a certificate or something at the end of the course and actually give them a particular role which will move the dynamics of the particular course forward. So, for example, if there's a lot of messages in a particular thread in a forum, we can attend to them questions first because we know there's going to be a cascade effect as they feed the information back to other students. They say that the best way of learning is teaching. So by actually giving these roles to students, then you can see it's a very positive, and it really does create good communicative dynamics in the community. Secondly, educational proxies. There are always differences in competencies and literacies between groups of students, and what you quite sometimes find is if you've got a particular group of students who come from maybe a more vulnerable or part of a more vulnerable group and not quite so they don't feel quite so at ease working online, then if you can actually find somebody within their particular social group and get them to act as an intermediary with the communication and the activities on the course, then this can actually be a positive effect. I mean, one particular example, I've got a couple of examples here, but for lack of time, let's just talk about one of them, was an online language course for Palestine female students. And to begin with, when they were just talking amongst themselves, they had the cameras on their courses, but as soon as a white European male teacher connected, they switched the cameras off and communication actually went down to a minimum. And if you're in a language course where you need need to train your production competencies, then you need to overcome that. So using what we're calling educational proxies can be a way of actually overcoming this particular difficulty. So inclusive language. Now, there's a direct relation at a research level that's been argued in appraisal theory between emotion and language. So the appraisal for effective tone actually can potentiate the learning of the students. Therefore, this should be taken into account in two senses. When we're interacting with the students, we should be careful the kind of language we're using with them, make sure it's inclusive so nobody feels excluded or we're putting any particular examples which is threatening to anybody. And also when we have the pre-course training sessions with the facilitators, mentors and tutors, they're also told the importance of these particular traits of language and encouraged to use them so that nobody actually feels excluded. And we can give emphasis to inclusive language at many different levels, but I'm just going to highlight some simple examples of phonetic, phonological level, the morphosyntactic level, pragmatic and social-linguistic level. So at a phonetic, phonological level, it's important when we're interacting with students that we emphasize the prosodic patterns and the pronunciation. So we take care to record our audios and videos at reasonable speed with clear pronunciation and highly stressed intonation. At a syntactic level, it's useful to use first person plural or informal plural, second person singular, with expressions such as how we take part in this course, which makes people feel included rather than said in other ways. At a pragmatic level, it's important to avoid sensitive topics where possible, which make people feel excluded. So, for example, in the case of refugees, sometimes you find in the forums, you get examples like in my country, it's not possible to register at a town hall because of the war. So when you get these things coming up, which come up occasionally, it's important to try and steer the students away from them. Also at the social linguistic level, there's an awareness of the situational context or culture of different language that's being used. So we're constantly asked them, please share any problems you have with a particular activity here. So that people are able to see they're actually, it's important for you what they're saying and how they're getting on. There's some data of the course here, which is not necessarily relevant. I like to point out there was a 98% completion rate, which is very high for MOOCs, which are often down to 10%. On the second MOOC, this is a MOOC that was made on active citizenship around 2019 and 2022. And the difference with this particular MOOC is that we didn't have direct access to the students beforehand, so we reached out via questionnaires. We ran the MOOC, and then the people that were most active and got the best results in the MOOC were invited to take part in a face-to-face workshop. So therefore, we had it as a hybrid MOOC as such. Okay, so the course was developed in a similar way after undertaking a needs analysis. We start off with student questionnaires to get the information we needed to actually structure the course. And then from there, we went forward to develop the course. Once again, the modules being agreed with the students who are going to take part in them. And they wanted to specify the ways in which the content of the course would actually be presented. So included lots of theory and practical explanations. And we weren't just targeting specific students who might be interested, but also people related to the area. Once again, we scaffold the language skills via different aspects of the course, communicative aspects, social aspects, collaborative aspects, and different kinds of ways in which the students could actually interact when they were undertaking the course. Once again, the forum activities were very, very important. Even though the tool itself was very, very limited, we found ways to include activities which would actually get the students to collaborate and come forward in and produce results that were directly relevant. It was helping them to train their linguistic competencies and at the same time learn the content. And It's quite often the role of the tutor to correct the activities on a course unless they're simple closed tests. But another useful tool to use in this way is to get to engage in peer correction. So we get the students to actually correct their peers' activities, and then these activities are subsequently corrected by the tutor. So it's quite a powerful way of getting people to engage. This is the results of the first iteration of the course, 14% completion rate. That's a lot more usual for an online course. Okay, so what have I tried to talk to you about very briefly and very superficially in this presentation? Well, the importance of the passive active scaffolding in developing a course. We anticipate everything we possibly can to make the course as inclusive as possible, and we build these mechanisms into the course from the very beginning. As the course goes along, we will detect problems and difficulties, and that's when we engage the active scaffolding mechanisms, perhaps additional explanation, perhaps more multilingual support, maybe different kinds of activities, but we do that to cope with the difficulties the students are having as the course goes along. The other important concept here, which is something which may not be obvious when you're building a course, is the idea of the course iteration. Now, it's not the same developing and running an online course as is writing a book. When we write a book, we have the project, we write the book, we go through an editing phase, and the book is published. Now, there might quite possibly be a fade errata produced for the list of errors in the book, produced as with time, which is put online, but typically a book is not touched until maybe a second edition is actually contemplated, I don't know, 5 years down the line. But the thing about an online course is highly probable that we run year after year. So the point is, what we can do is that what we learn from the course being run at the very beginning can be included. So if you like, the active scaffolding mechanisms can be included in the course as passive scaffolding for the next iteration of the course, and so on. And actually what is a very healthy approach in this way is if you find particular students who produce nice pieces of work and nice interactions, then at the end of the course we can actually reach out to them and say, well, you know, this is very good and we'd like to actually include your work as an example in the next iteration of the course. And they're usually very happy to do this, and over time you end up with a nicely polished and refined course. I've suggested the value of enhancing the student interaction by e-learning students and also educational proxies. If you have time and you're interested, then I'd suggest the concept of activeness that I published with a colleague of mine a few years ago, which actually tries to identify the dimensions of investment, integration, and performance in the way of actually quantifying the way that students interact with the resources and each other on the course. And it provides us with a metric we can use for structuring and evaluating that. Importance of the didactic and linguistic dimensions, as I mentioned earlier on. And finally, in the last point about elements requested by the students, you typically find that what they want is specific resources, maybe additional training for the things they're not used to doing if they're not used to working online, and or other kinds of activities. And the sooner we can get the students involved in the course design process, the better. It's not always possible, but it really does help provide a course which meets the needs of the students. And if they're coming from different cultural backgrounds, then this is even better. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much. Bye.